Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and why are you awake at this time? Thank you all for joining us for Tales from the Field, a TSA Webinar Experience. We are joined by 6 panelists. We'll have one more, Steven Platt, joining us shortly. And all of these panelists have unique paths, but a common bond of a vision of zero turtle extinctions. My name is Jordan Gray, and I'll be the host for tonight, and we'll be asking our panelists a lot of unique questions, and we hope that you yourself have questions to ask the panelists. It's our goal through this webinar that you will learn a bit about how each panelist came to work in their field and position, hear some of their most memorable experiences, and be inspired by their unique paths, yet common bond. So for a couple housekeeping items, if you have any comments, please put them in the chat feature of Zoom. However, if you have any questions for the panelists, please put those in the Q&A. After I get through asking our panelists various questions, I will then go to the Q&A feature and look at the questions you have for the panelists and ask them live. So I look forward to seeing all of your questions, as do our panelists. But let's start out tonight by going around the table and meeting our panelists, all of whom are inspiring and have a true vision for what conservation should be and their paths for how they get there. So first, I'd like to start off with TSA President Rick Hudson. Rick? Rick, you are muted right now.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry.
There we go.
Jordan's already introduced me. I'm the founder and president of TSA, and it's my distinct pleasure to be here today and to talk about the history of the TSA and what the bond we all share, as Jordan said.
All right, thank you, Rick. Next, I'd like to introduce Heather Barrett from Belize.
Hi, thanks, Jordan. It's great to be here. I'm Heather Barrett, and I am Deputy Director at Be Free, which is the Belize Foundation for Research and Environmental Education in Southern Belize. And we host the Hicatee Conservation and Research Center, which is a breeding facility for the Central American river turtle.
Thanks, Heather. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Cesar Rahman from Bangladesh.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cesar Rahman. I'm a co-founder of a Bangladesh-based conservation NGO called Creative Conservation Alliance, and we have been working for the protection and restoration of threatened freshwater turtles and tortoises in the country for almost a decade. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Cesar. And next, let's have Alejandra Monsiváis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alejandra Monsiváis, co-founder and coordinator of Estudiantes Conservando la Naturaleza, or in English, Students Conserving Nature, which is a Mexican nonprofit dedicated to study poorly known or threatened species, particularly turtles, and to provide academic opportunities to underserved students that live in the rural communities where we do field work.
All right, thank you, Alejandra. And Cris.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cris Hagen. I am the director at the Turtle Survival Center in South Carolina, where I manage the TSA's turtle assurance colonies, the living collection. And I've been interested in turtles my whole life, and this is what I do. Turtles all the time.
Absolutely. And last but very much not least in any way, Arunima Singh from India. Arunima, you're muted.
Hello everyone, I'm Arunima and I work with TSA India program as a project coordinator for ex-situ conservation program, and we work for head starting program and conservation breeding for freshwater turtle and tortoises. And I also had a rescue and rehabilitation program for the India program for the turtles always. And apart from that, I'm also pursuing my PhD in turtle ecology. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Aru. Okay, so if you're just joining us, this is our Tales from the Field webinar, and my name is Jordan Gray, Communications and Outreach Coordinator with Turtle Survival Alliance, and we will begin asking questions of all of our panelists, and we hope their answers inspire you and help you forge your own path in conservation. So my first question of the night goes to Rick Hudson. Rick, you've been involved in conservation for more than 30 years. If there was one defining or catalytic moment that made you say, this is what I want to dedicate my life to, what would it be?
Well, my aha moment or my cathartic moment occurred actually at the Hope Zoo in Kingston, Jamaica in 1993. The Jamaican iguana had just been rediscovered. I was leading a conservation and fundraising movement to get the program off the ground to try to resurrect this species that had just been rediscovered after being thought extinct for half a century. And I was in this enclosure with all these 2-year-old juveniles that had been hatched. And I don't know, I made this very visceral connection with iguanas and monitors both. You look at them and they look back at you, and there's this kind of connection. And I don't know, I had that moment that just determined that that's where I needed to be. And that's what I need to be doing for the rest of my life. So I started with iguanas and evolved into turtles.
All right, thanks, Rick. And I think I can speak for everybody and say we're glad that that catalytic moment happened. It's made the difference for species all across the world. All right, Arunima, as staff of the TSA India program, you're involved not only with turtles, but crocodilians, river dolphins, and other wildlife. Of all of these, do you have a most memorable story, and can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so actually from the field, I have so many stories, but I would like to share one which is from my own city, and it's on turtles. So it's about a survey we have done of River Gomti, which flows from through the city, where I'm working. So it was like I've started that survey, and I found only 2 species in 4 to 5 days. And on my 5th day, I've decided, okay, in the morning, I'll do a survey. And after that, I decided to sit down and just sitting along the river. And I was sitting and I was watching a few fishermen was doing fishing. And after about 1 hour, I've seen one fisherman taking out their nets, and there was one big stone-like structure. And later I realized, okay, it's not a stone, it's something else. So I went there, and when I've taken a close look of that, that was one turtle, and it was big Hardilla female. And I've never expected Hardilla female in that polluted river, because it's a slow flowing stagnant river. So that was the time I felt really happy. And after that, I realized the importance of the local communities and their knowledge. So it's really important, such kind of association with the local communities and fishermen, because for any scientific knowledge and even for the conservation, it is important to collaborate with them. So yeah, so that was my first survey and independent survey. So that's why this is the story, and I've learned so many things from that story. Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, Aru. My next question is for Caesar. Caesar, you've undoubtedly fast become one of Bangladesh's biggest champions for wildlife and their habitats. Can you tell us about the interesting road you took to get where you are now?
Thanks. Yeah, not sure whether I would be a perfect guy to give a career advice on conservation. The road I have taken, it's not maybe very traditional, but when I was finishing, I was going to Brooklyn College and did my high school in the States. I was a huge fan of Dr. George Schaller. For many of you who don't know George Schaller, he was an American conservationist, and he pioneered some of the very first studies of tiger in India, Chinese panda in China, gorillas in Africa. And what he did is he spent a lot of time spending months or years in remote areas and studying animal behavior. And I really wanted to be someone like him, like who would go in the remote areas and study wildlife. And I moved back to Bangladesh in 2011, and one of the very first studies I did was Burmese python. And during the process, many individuals have inspired me and shaped me. For example, I met Professor late Dr. Rudy Stockton in Arizona, and who, like, I told him about the studies I want to conduct, and he gave me donated me like $7,000, and that's on the first grant I got. And I took that money, came to Bangladesh, started the project. At the beginning, I was very much into the research, or I wanted to be more like an academician, like conduct information on wildlife and publish papers. But when it's starting exploring into the southeast of Bangladesh, the hill tracts and bordering Myanmar and India, and I was really fascinated by the whole landscape, the culture, and the people. And I soon realized, I just observing the destruction of hunting, destruction of the forest, and I soon realized, I just don't want to become someone who just document extinction, and started working more with the people, the government, and going more in the uncomfortable zone, which started almost a decade back. And at some point, with help of TSA and many other we established the nonprofit Creative Conservation Alliance. And yeah, it's going on.
Thank you, Caesar. Well, I think we can, say that, the path that you took to where you are now, you're inspiring a lot of people, especially in your country of Bangladesh, and the work that's being done is it's crucial work to being able to rewild the species back onto the landscape of Bangladesh. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, my next question is for Heather. Heather, you were born in the United States, but now you live most of the time at the Belize Foundation for Research and Environmental Education's just beautiful preserve in the Maya Mountains. How did you make your way there?
Great question. And I'll first say that I never imagined during my life or young adult years that I would live in the rainforest of southern Belize. That wasn't a goal. It wasn't even on my radar. I imagined that I would my background is in the arts and nonprofit management. I imagined that I would run museums and curate exhibitions and probably make art in my free time. So I imagined a very different experience for myself. But I was working in a gallery at the university after having many different types of jobs. I found that what I really enjoyed about working in the arts was supporting other artists and helping them find their way. And I ended up in the Bahamas for a while, supporting or working with some Caribbean artists. And I was really fulfilled by that. but it was temporary. And then I was working in galleries, and I guess really I was floundering for a long time, trying to find a place that could excite me and inspire me on a daily basis and challenge me. I found that in the jobs I had, I was bored easily and often. I'd stay for a year and I would just be done because I'd already done everything that was interesting to me. I'd already started new projects. And I was looking for new challenges and new opportunities. And so I love to travel. And I was going to Belize. Well, I was actually going to Guatemala because I wanted to take a language immersion course, and had picked a language school so that I could improve my Spanish, because I actually was targeting an organization called Partners in Health to go and work with them. But I needed to be essentially bilingual, and I wasn't. And honestly, I'm still not, but it became less relevant. So I went to Belize sort of as a stopover trip on my way to Guatemala. And I'd heard about this field station in the rainforest. And again, I loved being outdoors and hiking, but I had no experience with rainforest ecology or conservation or any of that. And I, looking back now, I was so naive because I thought, well, I'll just go and check out this field station that I heard about. And Be Free is not a place you just pop into. I mean, it's 6 miles back, a road that you're lucky if you get in and out of. And I arrived and it poured rain the whole time. It was pretty much a miserable experience, except that I was there with a student group of, they were college students, probably like 18, 19 years old, and they're from Kentucky. I was born in Kentucky. And at that time, not a lot of people left Kentucky for a lot of reasons. And so I was like, wow, this is pretty special. You're from Kentucky, I'm from Kentucky. We're here in this rainforest and you all seem really happy, even though it's pretty miserable. And that pit toilet is falling down. And, there wasn't a lot of amenities. I would call it more than rustic. Be Free has much improved since then. But what I kept seeing over and over again was the joy in these other people I was traveling with. Well, I wasn't, that I happened to be overlapping with. And I started to, I felt like my eyes were open to these educational opportunities and in this possibility of a different experience for people while learning. And so it was really the educational impact that Be Free had that spoke to me first. I loved the natural beauty, but the natural beauty was sort of secondary to the opportunity that the place presented. And I also saw opportunities for myself. I had ideas immediately. I was talking with Judy Dorson, who ran the education programs at the time. I had experience with websites. I had experience with writing grants. And so I just started asking, can I help? What can I do? And I didn't do it with the expectation that I would get a job, because honestly, I never really wanted to go back again at that point. But I started volunteering. I think I made a donation. I went home. Again, I went to Guatemala. I did not learn Spanish. That's a different story altogether. But over the coming months, I didn't forget about Be Free. And I started volunteering my services and making suggestions based on what I had experienced while I was there. And Judy and Jacob were very appreciative. And within a year, I was working in Gainesville, Florida, which is where Be Free was stationed, their US office at the time. And so I would just, show up and do and help, and they needed help. And after about a year, Jacob asked if I would draft a job description for a secretary for Be Free. And so I started working with him on the job description. And I said, you don't need a secretary. You need someone who can help you run this organization in these ways. And I listed them. And so we wrote the job description for what was at that time the director of organizational development. And once it was all done, he turned around and offered me the job. So I took it. And the rest is kind of history. I told him I would take it for 1 year. on a contract basis because I thought I'd probably move on. I'd get bored. I told him, he understood my history of like limited attention span. But he kept saying, I don't think you're going to get bored with Be Free. And it's been 11 years and I'm not bored yet.
Great. I think it's a good story for everyone watching and those interested in, following a path in conservation. Is you started with what you described as a miserable experience, and then you ended up at the same place in a job that you love and working with species and habitats that you're passionate about. So,
and I became a conservationist along the way. I mean, I cared about the environment, I cared about those things, but I didn't pursue it for employment. And so my knowledge and my understanding of the issues has grown from my work with Be Free. And I am now in love with that rainforest, in love with the rain, in love with the challenges and the bugs, and improved a lot of things. But it's been an amazing journey. And I feel like I'm excited for where it will take me next.
All right, thanks a lot, Heather. That was great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Steve Platt actually was able to now join us. Steve is coming to us from Cambodia. So just for a moment, Steve, I'll let you introduce yourself to everyone. And we're currently going through rounds of questions for all of our panelists. So Steve.
Yeah, I'm Steve Platt. I work for Wildlife Conservation Society. I'm working in Southeast Asia, formerly I spent most of my time in Myanmar. Since recently, because of some political troubles there, I've been stationed outside of the country. I was in Cambodia last year. This year I'm in Laos. But also when we don't have COVID, we can travel freely. I also work in Thailand, China, and some of the other places. And so I'm responsible for our crocodile project, Siamese crocodile, and then some various turtle projects in the area.
All right, thanks a lot, Steve. And for everyone watching, for Steve, for Caesar, for Arunima, it is very early in the morning for them being on the other side of the world. So we're very grateful for them to be able to join us. So my next question is for Cris Hagen. Cris, you have been involved with Turtle Survival Alliance since the very beginning. Can you tell us your story of how you went from working at the Savannah River Ecology Lab in Georgia to now being the director of one of the world's premier assurance colonies for turtles and tortoises?
Sure. Well, being at the Ecology Lab, I started there in 2002. I moved there from Hawaii, actually. And that's where I knew I always wanted to be. I just had to go do some other things first, a little bit of gypsy biology here and there around the country and out of the country. And I knew I needed to be in the Southeast. That's where all the heat and humidity and turtles and crocodilians are. So I finally came back here when I was 30 years old to be with Whit and Kurt Buellman, who also is the founder of the Turtle Survival Alliance, and his wife, Tracy. And just it was to be in that mecca of herpetology and turtle researchers and conservation at the Ecology Lab. And while there, it wasn't part of my job at all, but I was developing assurance colonies. I was heavily involved with the TSA. In terms of what we originally had were TMGs, taxon management groups for different species of turtles. It was all volunteer based in the beginning of the TSA. For the first 9 years or so, there were no employees. And so we just did this because it needed to be done. And luckily the Ecology Lab, the University of Georgia, did not keep Kurt and I from keeping all these turtles at the Ecology Lab. And so as time went on, I mean, the TSA always wanted a facility, but there was the question of cost and where to do it. And over time, as the organization grew, we were able to put together the first 2 positions in the United States anyway. And I was hired in 2010 with the TSA, the same time as Kaliar was hired, as well as Harry Lala we were some of the first employees, along with Heather Lowe in Fort Worth. And so, you know, we did that, and I was able to keep my job at the university, at the ecology lab and the TSA, because we didn't have any facilities then, or any, you know, office all over in South Carolina anyway. So, and for 3 years, I worked both jobs pretty much full time. And also in 2010, a friend of mine, Dr. Sam Seashall, who's involved with crocodilians primarily, is a veterinarian. And he offered this place, this center in South Carolina near Charleston, to be used for turtles and turtle conservation and turtle breeding. And that just turned into putting together a capital campaign and the TSA purchasing this facility in 2013. And ever since then, March of 2013, I started slowly moving animals from the ecology lab, which is about 2 hours away from the Turtle Survival Center. It took me about 6 months of going back and forth, taking care of the collection there and here, driving back and forth, moving tubs and turtles and racks. A lot of people had helped me with that and had a hand in that. So a lot of people to thank for that. But and then here we are, a little over 9 years later. This place is, Rick was just here the past few days, and we're talking about how much this place has transformed over the past 9 years and really turned into this premier breeding center for all of these critically endangered species. And we've been quite successful with almost every species that we've set out to work with here. And I never really would have imagined the amount of success that we've had in such a short period of time after moving these animals from not only SREL, but also big groups from out of the country as well, such as like Hong Kong. And we just x-rayed Corrigal binifrons this afternoon for the beginning of the breeding season. And we have 16 gravid females carrying 34 eggs right now. So we're off to a great start this year.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I think if you were to write a book, it would be called Moving Turtles. Just all the stories you have there. But yeah, thank you very much. And I think, you know, for a lot of those, they've heard of the TSC, the Turtle Survival Center, but don't know maybe much of the history. So I appreciate you filling us in on that. So my next question is for Alejandra. Alejandra, you and Taggart Butterfield co-founded Students Conserving Nature, the Mexican nonprofit dedicated to studying the ecology of poorly known or threatened species. And it also provides academic opportunities to underserved students, particularly in rural communities. What inspired you to begin this nonprofit?
Well, I will say that there were three inspiration sources, or three motivations. First motivation came up when Taggart, who is my coworker, co-founder, and husband, he was doing field work for his PhD project in different places throughout Mexico, studying turtle communities. And it was impossible for him to be simultaneously in all these places collecting data. So he thought that it made more sense to involve local communities in his research because it's local people who live near the field sites. They get to see the turtles very often. And in many cases, they know where to search for turtles. So it's easier for them to collect data. So he realized that he needed help from the community. Another source of inspiration, if we call it like that, came up from noticing the curiosity of local kids about the work he was doing. Happens a lot that kids gather around us when they see us measuring a turtle or handling field equipment. These are very smart kids. Unfortunately, many of them, they don't study or they don't finish either secondary school or high school because their parents cannot afford the expenses related with taking them to school, or just because going to school or finishing school is not a priority in the family. So many of these kids, they ended up taking very bad paid jobs. So we were in a situation in which we as a biologist and researchers needed help from the community, and kids also needed support to go to school or finish school. So we thought in a program that consists in awarding students with a monthly scholarship so that they can pay transportation to get to school, or pay a fee that is required by the school, buy notebooks, clothes, whatever they need to go to school. And they help us monitor populations, turtle populations in their weekends. So, well, of course, they don't go to the field by themselves. We hire a local adult that go with them, a person that we call the local leader, because aside from surveilling the scholarship program, he also is involved with decision making. So, well, an additional thing about these kids is that given that they grew up in the field, they go hunting, they go fishing, they know the forest very well. So they know how to navigate through the forest, and they know the natural risks that are found in it. So taking them to the field was not really a matter of concern. And the third motivation came from our desire to make this mutual support between we, the biologists, and the community long-lasting. And the only way that we could do that was transforming our efforts into a nonprofit. And that way we could consolidate our mission and attract funding to make this project sustainable. Of course, we were aware that having or running a nonprofit wouldn't be easy, but we thought that it would have a lot of potential to grow, because, for instance, in Mexico, there are not organizations studying and monitoring terrestrial turtle populations, or at least not that we know of. Many focus in marine species. So, and also because an important part of our work is focused with teenagers, so that's also unique. So those are the three inspirations.
Thanks, Alejandra. It really is inspiring work. I love the work that Students Conserving Nature does. And for all of you watching this evening, morning, afternoon, or middle of the night, one of the students that has both benefited from and benefits Students Conserving Nature is going to be featured as our turtle hero tomorrow throughout our social media platforms. So it really is making a big difference. So thank you, Alejandra. All right, Steve, this is the one I hope you have a doozy for us. So for those who know you, if there was ever someone with tales from the field, it would be you. Can you share your most memorable tale from the field with us?
Yeah, I guess there have been quite a few of them, more so with crocodiles than with turtles. But yeah, probably the most memorable turtle experience I had, or certainly one of the most rewarding turtle experiences I've had, was it happened in 2009 or 2010. My mind's still a bit foggy. It's so early in the morning here, but I went into the Arakan Mountains in Western Burma. Myself and some other WCS employees from the Burma program, and we were looking for the Arakan forest turtle, Hyosemys depressa, and the Arakan mountains in Western Burma, they're not high mountains, but they're covered and they're really inaccessible. Very few roads penetrate the area. Just covered in forest and dense bamboo jungle, lots of elephants in there. In fact, all the large mammals are there except for tigers and rhino, which rhinos are definitely extinct and tigers are probably extinct in the area. But the only time we knew from our previous trips that the only time these turtles were active was in the wet season. We had been there in the dry season, and we had found plenty of shells in village trash dumps and at people's houses. And until that time, we weren't, there'd been no records of this turtle since about, I believe, 1905. And so we went back in 2009 during the rainy season, right at the beginning of the rainy season, to look for these turtles. Went into southern Arakan where we had not been before. There's a large protected area there. And it just, it's just one of the most miserable places on earth during the wet season. It just rains and rains almost without let up. There are leeches everywhere. You can't brush into a bush without just getting covered with leeches. But it's a fascinating area. There's a book that I've never read it, but I've seen it at the bookstore that a Navy SEAL wrote, and it's entitled No Easy Day. Well, if I ever write a book about the Arakan, that'll be the title of it, No Easy Day, because you never have an easy day, but you also, every day is interesting. There's always something to see and something to learn. Anyway, we have been looking for about a week unsuccessfully for these turtles. We knew that they were probably moving around, and we were just getting fatigued and worn out. And late in the afternoon, we climbed up to the top of this hill, and it is extremely rugged terrain. The only way to go through it is to walk along these stream courses and then go up. The turtles live on the slopes in the dense bamboo. And we got to the top of this mountain. It was raining, and both Ken Mew and I, Ken Mew works for WCS and Myanmar, and we kind of got to the top of the mountain together with a local guide, and just right there we staggered in, and we got to the crest of the mountain. There was a turtle just sitting out in the open. It's the first time one of these turtles had been seen in the wild by a Western, by a biologist. Since for over 100 years ago, and it was kind of like a reward. We put in all this work, and then finally the forest just offered up this turtle just sitting there right in the open. So I have a picture. I think it's probably in a TSA magazine. If not, I know it's been published somewhere. Of Mew holding that turtle, a big female. And we marked it and we released it and went on back, and we spent another almost 2 weeks there before we left off. But that was, from a personal standpoint, that was certainly one of the most rewarding experiences that I had during this, during my time in Southeast Asia.
All right, thanks, Steve. If we could do a whole entire webinar just called Tales from the Field with Steven Platt. So, and I know people will tune in for that. So thanks a lot for telling your most memorable one. I'm sure it was an amazing experience. So I want to go back to Rick Hudson. Rick, you are the president of the Turtle Survival Alliance. Can you tell us how the TSA began and how you've seen it evolve over its more than 20-year history?
Well, it started kind of in the mid-90s when the word of the Asian turtle crisis first got out, 95 to 97. And there were a lot of people were angry and frustrated and didn't know what to do. And as all these species were showing up in markets we'd never seen before, and the scale and volume of the trade was shocking. And everybody was wanted to help, but no one really knew what to do. So I remember that one time it was John Baylor, myself, Kurt Buhlman, Dave Collins, Dwight Lawson, others were went up to the Savannah River Ecology Lab to meet with Whit and to talk about, space at the SREL site that might be appropriate for developing captive colonies. Because at that time, we were all convinced that captive breeding was going to be the way to save these species. We knew we had to get them into captivity and before they went extinct. So we were standing there talking, and it was apparent that there was all these different sectors that wanted to help. And I think this was in 2000, and that's when the idea hit me that we just need to bring all these various people together and see what happens. And when I came up with this idea and I started describing it to John Bailey, he says, because you put all those people together in a room together, you're going to have a bloodbath, because it was commercial collectors, it was captive breeders, veterinarians, regulatory people like Fish and Wildlife. You had all these people that did not see eye to eye, and we're going to throw them in one room and see what comes out. Well, we did that in January 2001. We hosted a workshop at Fort Worth Zoo. We brought in 80 participants from all over the world, and it was a very difficult process. The first 2 days were terrible. We weren't getting anywhere. People were frustrated. And it wasn't until day 3, the last day, that one of the facilitators, Susie Ellis, who's on our board now, pulled one representative from each sector aside and kind of formed this subcommittee and to talk about how those sectors might work together. And that was the genesis of the Turtle Survival Alliance. And so it happened in January 2001. While we were still kind of finding our legs, the massive Hong Kong confiscation occurred, which I think there was 12 or 13,000 turtles and tortoises seized in Hong Kong in December 2001. We brought 7,500 of them to the US, staged this whole thing in Florida. And that really kind of was a trial by fire. It bonded a lot of people by a very difficult process, bringing all these turtles in and trying to place them and build assurance colonies. And it certainly bonded us and put us on the map. I hope we never have to do that again, but it really was a cathartic moment that kind of brought us all together. And we quickly, after I guess about 4 years, realized that doing captive breeding for all these species was not a panacea. We really needed to reach a lot of these species in the wild, and there was not a lot of field programs going on at that time. So we got our first big grant in 2005 to initiate some field programs. WCS was working along the same lines, and we started partnering with WCS in Myanmar and other places. But that's how we evolved from transitioning from captive programs into field programs. We adopted the Committed to Zero Extinctions mantra about 10 to 12 years ago. But this organization has gone from very humble beginnings with a captive breeding bent to one that is truly global and field programs in over 20 countries around the world. It's phenomenal. This group here is a reflection of the complexity of the organization. This just tonight just makes me really proud to look back at where TSA has come from and where we are now, and where we want to go. But I think we're certainly recognized as the largest and most successful and most effective turtle conservation globally. And that's something I'm really proud of. And I want to thank everybody that helps us realize that goal of zero turtle extinctions. So thanks for everybody's support.
All right, thanks a lot, Rick. And for all of us, with our common bond of zero turtle extinctions, I think we can say thank you for all the efforts that you and others have done throughout the years to get the TSA to where it is today. So my next question is back to Arunima. Arunima, you have quickly become an inspiration for female biologists in India. What advice do you have for women in India and across the world who want to become involved in conservation?
Yeah. So, yeah, what I believe every job have their own challenges and beauty. And in same way, if it is a male or female, everyone have to find their own path. If you really want to do anything, I belong to a small village and my family was very conservative, and I've never thought they will accept this conservation work, but my work convinced them to. And being a woman, I have worked in many remote areas like a male biologist too. And today, many women in India too working in wildlife field. Even at our TSA India program, the working staff of women's are higher than men's.
All right, thank you so much, Aru. Yeah, you know, you've had, if somebody wants to look up, more information and just how quickly Arunima has become an inspiration in India, it's easy enough to, search the internet. Last year alone, I think there was 20 some newspaper articles written about your efforts. And, I think that's really important for especially female biologists and male biologists to read about your path and just, from your beginnings to where you are now and all that you've accomplished. So thank you. All right, Caesar. In December, the Creative Conservation Alliance released for the first time in Bangladesh 10 captive bred Asian giant tortoises into a community managed forest in the Chattagram Hill Tracts. Can you tell us how you integrate communities into the protection of turtles and tortoises in Bangladesh?
Yeah, so the site we work, it's in southeastern part of Bangladesh, and which is very, very similar to Western Myanmar, as Steve described. It's very remote, and soon we realized that it's very difficult to make any conservation impact without integration of the local communities. So one thing we realized, it's very crucial to build that trust and relationship with the local people, and to do that, I think we really needed to have that conversation with them. And so when we went there first, we didn't really initiate this conversation from a very scientist versus local community perspective. And instead, we started that conversation from very human to human perspective. First, really build that, form the relationship and trust with the communities, and that's how it started to happen. And what to do? We also hire local communities. We hired them as parabiologists, and they become the ambassador for conservation, and they monitor, or they really go from families to families and help them, give them the message for conservation. And as we speak, we released like 10 captive bred Asian giant tortoises back in December, and we established a field station in that village. And a very important thing that we have learned, it's very crucial to have constant presence in that area. And we have 2 people staying in the field station, 2 people from the local communities that we hire, and we pay monthly salaries, and they monitor the tortoises, and they became part of the village. And that's how I think we have been doing the conservation, and we incentivize the communities. Like we just built a hydram, a water pump that brings water from the stream to the village, and which really helped the villagers and saving their time, and that kind of support to the communities is very much needed to really incentivize them towards conservation. So yeah, it's not really a one size fits all model that we follow, that it depends on the context from village to village, and we really have to learn through trials and error working in the communities. Thanks.
Thanks, Caesar. And integrating the communities in these conservation efforts, I think you'll agree, is just so important, because at the end, all of us conservationists can put so much effort into trying to bring back a species, augment populations, make positive and proactive changes, but it starts and ends at the community level. If the community is not aware and engaged and really has a stake in the long-term survival of the species and its habitats, the conservation is really, our efforts are only a halfway measure. So I think, what you all are doing is really inspiring for everybody to watch. So thank you. All right, Heather, we're coming back to you. So the TSA Be Free Hickory Conservation and Research Center has fast become the centerpiece of the conservation of the Central American river turtle, or Hickory, in Belize. Among the efforts is Hickory Awareness Month in October. Can you tell us your most memorable moment from Hickory Month?
Yes, well, there are many, but first I'll say that Hickory Awareness Month didn't exist. It was something that we invented, and would kind of, in a funny way, thought, well, holidays get established all the time, celebratory months get established, let's see if Hickory Awareness Month could be a thing. And we picked October because we were going to release a film that TSA and Be Free partnered on, and it was called Hope for Belize's Hickory, and we wanted a release date. So the month actually grew from the need to really celebrate the release of that film and draw attention to it. And interestingly, after it was over, we had requests like, what's going to happen next year during Hickory Awareness Month? And we were like, I guess it's going to happen again. And so 5 years later, it continues, which has been sort of a fun growth on its own. But one of my proudest moments during Hickory Awareness Month was we send out material packets to schools across the country, and we also send out emails. A lot of mail is a funny thing in Belize. You send things out, people don't really have addresses. Maybe you have a post office box, maybe the school has a post office box, maybe you can mail it to the store on the corner, but street numbers, street addresses, it's kind of a loose thing. So, and email is kind of the same thing. Like, people will sign up for an email and forget their password. So people are constantly changing their email address or being locked out of their email. So distributing materials consistently to teachers and schools is a huge challenge. The best way to do it is to drive up to a school and deliver it. But with nearly 500 schools in total in the country, that's no easy task. So we kind of take it by faith. We do these mailings, these emails to every email address we have, and we try to keep them as up to date as possible, knowing that we're going to get a bunch bounced back. We do the mailings with the same idea. We mail to about 100 schools a year, thinking that, okay, we'll target different ones each year, and maybe we'll get back 10% of the packets, and we hope that the ones that don't come back made it to their destination. And every now and then we'll get some feedback. Oh, thanks for that packet. Or we get an email saying we used it, but generally we don't know. So we put it out there, and unless we get some likes on social media, we just don't know what happens. But one year, probably the third year that we were celebrating Hickory Awareness Month, I get a formal email from the principal of Hummingbird Elementary School. And she was writing to say that their school had received the materials and were so grateful and inspired that the Standard 4 class decided to form a Hickory committee. And this Hickory committee took it upon themselves to educate everyone else in the school. So they went from class to class and they used our materials, including the Hope for Belize's Hicatee film, and they taught other kids about Hicatee turtles, which is what the Central American river turtle is called in Belize. And then they also wanted to do a fundraiser during an art fair for us. And so the letter was requesting permission for them to raise money on our behalf, which is a shocking endeavor in Belize. And so I was so humbled, and I said, yes, that's amazing. Absolutely. Can we be supportive? What can we do? I was not as interested in receiving the money as I was them taking this amazing initiative and ownership and being excited about the conservation of the species. And so during this event, they set up a booth. They made games related and games for fun, and then games related to learning about the Hicatee. They had little Hicatee ambassadors. They made Hicatee t-shirts. I mean, it was phenomenal what they did. And they took photos and videos, and they sent those things to me, and along with a check for 147 Belize dollars, which was just amazing. And I only know about that because they made the time to tell me about it. But I can only imagine that maybe things not as grand happened elsewhere, but people are very appreciative of the materials they receive, but they don't always say it or can't always connect back with you. So I felt really proud, and that even if it only made it to Hummingbird Elementary School, we really made a difference that year.
That's great, Heather. Thank you so much. Just engaging those communities and individual people is so rewarding, and to be able to take your passion and see somebody else really grab it, I think is what we all aim for. And with Hicatee Awareness Month, you all, every year it's growing, and you're making a difference, not only for a species, but really fostering this passion for conservation in Belize for the turtle and for its habitats and other wildlife. So it's really great. Thank you. All right, Cris Hagen, this might give you a big head, but your knowledge of turtles is amongst the best in the world. What inspired you, and how did you go about gaining this knowledge?
Well, inspiration probably came from just life in general, just observing what was around me as a child, in my backyard. And I've always had an interest in wildlife and natural history and paleontology and all that stuff. So it was just an interest and a passion and a dedication for all of that stuff. And turtles and crocodilians just kind of happened to be at the forefront of all that. And I was lucky by geography to grow up in southwestern Ohio, where there were lots of herpetological societies, even way back in the 70s and 80s. So I got a lot of experience with that from a very young age, and was teaching environmental education using reptiles and amphibians starting at age 11 by volunteering at my local natural history museum. And I also was near Mike Good at the Columbus Zoo. Columbus Zoo is one of the premier turtle breeding facilities anywhere, breeding like over 50 species of turtles, even by the early 1980s. So I was going behind the scenes there at the zoo from a very early age and seeing all these neat turtles from all over the world. And, it's just, again, that dedication to it and inserting myself everywhere, showing up to every meeting and conference and field event that I could go to, and hanging out with experts and reading what I could and looking things up. Like now it's almost impossible to keep up with all the literature that's coming out constantly, but in 1980 it wasn't all that difficult. And it's also doing this, being a turtle biologist, being a turtle conservation biologist, and all of us having this common goal of wanting to save these turtles from extinction, wanting to see them in the wild where they belong, and these captive programs trying to get some of these turtles repatriated back into the wild. That's our goals, but it's a massive amount of patience and time commitment. I mean, you're looking at decades. I mean, most of us won't get to see the fruits of our efforts. You know, and some things we will, but some things we won't. But hopefully there will be a younger generation that enjoys this stuff and is interested in this stuff and will continue doing these things. And when the time is right, can repatriate these some of these species back to where they belong, as well as continuing to protect common ones and less common ones in the wild as they still occur now. So yeah, it's just the lifelong passion of it, and never really giving up on it, even though it's a bleak situation.
Cris, that's an awesome answer. Thank you so much, and for really going into more about it, because there's so many youths who become interested in something, but then to really dig into it and hold that interest. It takes not only work from yourself, but also others influencing you. And I think what you talked about some there, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes of, if your life's work can be completed in your lifetime, you're not thinking big enough. And so I think that really relates to turtle conservation. Like you're saying, many of us may not see the efforts that we're working towards in our lifetimes, but we hope that that torch and that that inspiration will be passed on. So thanks a lot. All right, I'm going to move to Alejandra. Alejandra, what are the challenges of the work you do in Mexico, and how have you overcome or plan to overcome some of these obstacles?
Well, we face many challenges indeed, dealing with bureaucracy, Mexican bureaucracy, and finding funding sources are among them. But I'll tell you about two more interesting challenges. One of our biggest challenge is to think in strategies that really help students that are part of a scholarship program to develop skills useful for their professional future. As I mentioned, a major issue in rural communities is that jobs are not formal, badly paid, and temporary. Additionally, education is deeply deficient, and there are no extracurricular activities where kids could learn new things. So in a very competitive world, these kids need to support to develop skills that will be useful for the future. So the strategy that we are implementing right now is diversifying the duties that the students of the program have to carry on. For example, aside of sampling turtles and taking data and field notes, other duties are reading and writing reports, entering data in the computer. So we have to learn them, teach them how to use the computer, the programs, because they don't know. They also have to prepare a presentation for the classmates about the work they do with turtles at the end of their year of participation in the program. So that's one big challenge. And another challenge has to do with the research that we carry out on turtles. So aside from the scholarship program and the monitoring activities with the kids, we have a special projects focused in specific species and questions. These are carried out mainly or exclusively by the coordinators of the nonprofit, Taggart and I, and the local leaders. For example, we have a project with the Sierra box turtle, Terrapene nelsoni, in which we are assessing its genetic structure and conservation status throughout its range. So for this project, we must sample as many turtles as possible. However, it's not that easy to find them in the wild. So to increase our sampling effort, we trained our dog, that is a beagle, to track box turtles in the field. And I could say that last year was very successful. I don't have the exact number of individuals that she found, but around 25% of the turtles that we sampled last season were found by our dog. So those, I think, are interesting challenges.
Thank you, Alejandra. That the last point you were making about I love box turtles, but for many terrestrial species, the utilization of working dogs has become very vital to being able to gain population data much more accurately than humans walking transects. And at our annual symposium on the conservation biology of turtles, tortoises and freshwater turtles, there's been different talks about that. So I look forward to hearing more about the efficacy of those efforts with the dogs in the future. So thank you very much.
Me too. You're welcome.
All right, so our last question for the panelists will go to Steve Platt. And then we will go into a Q&A session from the viewers. So if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A feature, and we would love to ask those of our panelists. All right, Steve. So arguably the most successful endeavor of the TSA Wildlife Conservation Society Myanmar Forest Department program is that of the Burmese star tortoise. Now with thousands of a once functionally extinct species back on the landscape, was there ever a moment you just knew we can do this?
Yes and no, Jordan. I started, I went there, when did I go? In 1999, looking for star tortoises. And at that time, the situation was dire. I mean, even the people in the wildlife sanctuary, the staff were collecting tortoises to sell. There was just really, the wildlife sanctuary was established for Eld's deer rather than for tortoises, and people just didn't really have an idea of how precious these animals were, and it was just a way to make money. So you talk to these villagers, and they were talking about, yeah, we sold 300 of them last year. And for the amount of money they were getting, that was a lot of money. At that time, Myanmar, and it still is a really impoverished country. And so a person could get the equivalent of a month's salary by selling a star tortoise to a dealer. It was all out in the open at that time, just truckloads of tortoises moving across the border into China. And at that point, it was just one of frustration. It was kind of like, well, I can go out and I can find these tortoises and we could figure out where they were and learn a little bit about them, but they're going to be gone pretty soon, and there's nothing I can do about it. And then we went back in 2001 and we did a to the same place and did a workshop, a training workshop with Bill Holmstrom from WCS in New York came down. And at that time, we couldn't even find them in the wild. There were probably still a few around, but they were functionally extinct. And so I went in 2001, decided I was going to leave the field and go into academics. So I spent about 10 years in academics. And then in 2011, we were hired to go back to Myanmar, Kelly R with TSA and myself with WCS. And I really didn't know what to expect. I mean, we had been back and forth, during those 10 years, but hadn't really been involved with, on the ground conservation. Situation was pretty dire at that time. The only star tortoises we had were in the assurance colonies, and they weren't being real well managed. I think, kind of like what Caesar was saying, you really have to have boots on the ground we were trying to manage these projects from afar with people that didn't really have a lot of experience with captive breeding. So once we were kind of there on the ground and got things going, I mean, you can look at the numbers of hatchlings that we started to get, you know, piddled along less than 100 a year. And then in 2011, we took over, and it was really just due to Kelly Arrett. You know, she gets all the credit for this. She just kind of, you know, she knew how to work the system to make improvements. Whereas I would just go in and start, you know, get mad and tell people what to do. That would be my approach. She was took a much more subtle approach. You know, that's her culture. She had the right solution. And sure enough, we started breeding, you know, we started having really good success reintroducing these tortoises. And so, I mean, reproducing these tortoises in captivity. And so then somebody, you know, our directive was to, let's go back to these wildlife sanctuaries and see where we are, you know, 10, 12 years after our initial visits. And we got there and started walking around and talking to people. There weren't any tortoises, but we could see the potential. And we had a meeting one night around the campfire and just kind of a brainstorming mission with myself and Kelly R and the other WCS Bernese staff. And we all just kind of came to a meeting of the minds and said, yeah, we can, you know, we can do this. We can make it happen. You know, the next step is let's get some funding. And there was, you know, there were a lot of sources. People were willing to give us money. And, but yeah, probably that trip in 2011 to Minzentong was where the whole, the genesis of the whole project got its got its start. It's been going until recently with the, you know, the political troubles in Myanmar. It was going just fine. We've done it in 2 wildlife sanctuaries, and we were looking to start working in a 3rd, but we've had to postpone our plans just because of the, you know, instability and security issues in those areas. A lot of fighting and stuff. We just can't get in there now.
Thanks so much, Steve. You know, for anybody who would like to learn more about that program, you've written it so well, the history and the continued achievements and some setbacks with the Burmese Star Tortoise program in the annual TSA magazine Turtle Survival. So I think that's a great place for people to kind of be able to do some research on their own, but I really appreciate you answering that question. So what we're going to do now is turn it to questions from the Q&A, and I'm actually going to switch so that we're in the gallery view for all of those attending the webinar tonight. So our first question goes to Cris Hagen. So Cris, Doug asks, I'm wondering if you relate to my initial experience with turtles. It was a pet shop red-eared slider with a plastic palm tree island container. This was the beginning of a lifetime of caring for herps, particularly turtles.
I do remember that situation, red-eared sliders and the plastic container with the palm tree for sure. That was part of the pet shop turtle experience. I never actually had a red-eared slider, and I caught them in the wild, but I was always let them go. The first turtle that I ever kept was a common snapping turtle when I was 6 years old. But the first turtle I ever found that I kind of really got interested in, I was probably 4 or 5 on our property near Columbus, was a dead map turtle. It was just a skull and a shell. And just seeing that shell and the vertebra in there and the skull, I mean, that's something really attracted me to the form of the turtle at that time from a very young age. But yes, I certainly remember all of that and all of the gimmicky pet store things that still exist to this very day. But yeah, just a different species of turtle. And it was, yeah, certainly back then I was not keeping them as well as I am keeping them today. There was a lot of trial and error.
Thanks, Cris. Yeah, I think for all of those who keep turtles and tortoises, you know, there's so much evolution that has occurred within the captive husbandry sector.
Yeah,
that
the resources are so much more today than they used to be. And all there were TFH books and people, if you knew them, that were keeping turtles to talk to. That was it.
Right.
And some literature.
And now there's almost an unlimited resource for people to be able to go out there and find information. So thanks for the question, Doug.
Yeah, thanks.
Doug actually has another question, and it goes out to all the panelists, I think, in some way. It was first posed to Cris Hagen is it becoming more or less difficult to identify confiscations at the borders? What efforts are in place to locate the place of origin of turtles, and how do you decide which, if any, can be reintroduced? And I think for Cris, for Rick, for Arunima, and for Steve, all of you probably have experienced this in some way, shape, or form, and I think we'd love to hear your answers on it. So if you have something you'd like to say, go ahead.
Well, we've all got different stories. I'm sure there's different perspectives. From the U.S. side of things, the turtle confiscations of U.S. turtles we're dealing with now are primarily people that are trying to smuggle turtles out through the U.S. mail or FedEx, protected species in the U.S. that they can't be shipped legally. So people are smuggling them out through FedEx, the U.S. mail, or UPS. Many of these turtles are being seized at JFK and other ports of entry or by U.S. Fish and Wildlife inspectors. In anticipating that those numbers are going to grow, especially with U.S. box turtles, and we're going to, anticipating the need to get those back on the landscape at some point, we've had a contractor with a geneticist do a range-wide survey of eastern box turtles to determine, how to identify genetically where those specimens came from. Can we pinpoint it down to river basin or mountain range, or how close can we pinpoint where those turtles might go back? We haven't done any repatriations yet, but there's a whole suite of things that have to be addressed when turtles are confiscated in terms of, initial triage, getting the turtles settled in and quarantined, disease tested. Then you have to work with the state biologists to figure out if they're going to want those turtles back and where do they go. So, zoos have been really reluctant to take confiscated turtles just because it's so open-ended. You can take a seizure and all of a sudden find out they've got some really hot disease and you can't get rid of them. And then, where do they go? So Dave Collins, who is now a TSA employee, is running the North American Turtle Safe program. And Dave has really been instrumental in putting together a process for, to stage these confiscations to where there's triage that certain zoos participate in, disease screening and quarantine, genetic screening, and then working with state biologists to get them back on the landscape. So it's a very complicated process, at least for US native turtles. Now, I'm going to turn this over to other countries who work with confiscations, and their stories will be much different than how we're approaching North American turtles. So I hope that's answered the question from the US perspective, but I'll turn it over to Arunima now, because she sees so many thousands of Indian turtles and handles many more confiscated turtles than we do. So I'll turn it over to Aru.
Yeah. So we also confiscate many turtles, and usually we have started that repatriation program also. Like if we get any interstate incidents, then we do the repatriation program, and we have also collaborated with the CITES, and once we have also repatriated one from India to somewhere not in I think Nepal, and also we have repatriated that way. But yeah, again, as Rick sir said, like there is procedures involved, which is like studying genetics, and then sending the species back to the natural habitat, because sometimes it's very difficult to know from where the species belong. So in those situations, it's really difficult to understand, but most of cases we get to know from where the turtles are coming, in the way when we get any poacher or anyone with the turtles, so then we get some idea like from where they are coming. So on the basis of that information, we send back to the turtles to the wild.
Thanks, Aru. This also might be a great opportunity for Steve and Cris to talk about the big-headed turtle confiscations in Myanmar, and the efforts to not only provide immediate triage for those animals, but long-term care, and then looking at getting those animals back into the wild.
Yeah, I guess I'll start off and then Cris can pick up. I was actually not there when that happened. And Cris and I kind of passed each other, missed each other by a couple of days. I was in the field and couldn't be reached. But yeah, it was horrible. Just several thousand of these big-headed turtles were confiscated. We had two confiscations. The first confiscation, they were just in terrible shape, and the mortality rates were really high. And Kelly R was there. Most of the Burmese WCS staff were there, and psychologically, it took a toll when you're doing your best to save the lives of these animals, and they're just every morning you go there and there's just I've seen the photographs laid out on the necropsy table, 20 or 30 turtles that had died through no fault of our own. It was just, they were so far gone. The ones we managed to save, the second confiscation, we did a lot better because the animals hadn't been held in captivity that long. And we established an assurance colony at the Turtle Rescue Center in Maymu, which is not very far from Mandalay, but it's up in the hills. And we've had some success in breeding those animals. And we had planned to take the rest of them and release them into a protected area in southern Myanmar, where historically we're fairly certain that they occurred, and there may be a few still there. But before we could get that underway, we should have done it about a year ago, a year and a half ago. COVID intervened and we couldn't travel. And then, as things started, the COVID situation started to cool off. Then there was, lots of political instability in that area where we had planned to release the turtles. We simply just can't get into right now because of fighting, and it's just not safe. You can't travel. A lot of the roads are mined now. So we have those turtles on hand, and it was, we're taking care of them. Hopefully, at some point we'll be able to put them back out there. But to get back to the question, also in Myanmar, they were starting to do a fairly decent job of interdicting turtle shipments. I think it's a lot less now than it used to be, simply because there aren't a lot of turtles aren't as common as they were back in the mid 1990s, when they were just moving them out by thousands. So the low value species, if people find them, they may sell them, but they don't go looking for them. It's the high value species, particularly star tortoises and the big-headed turtles that people go after. But the star tortoises, literally, we in our assurance colonies are like maximum security prisons. We still, we have to keep them under lock and guard. We have electronic surveillance, and still we have thefts. They don't, they get a lot of tortoises from a money standpoint. They take a lot. We breed so many of them, it doesn't make an impact on the population. Not that we want it to happen, but it's not interfering with our operations. But these aren't just people in the village that need a few bucks to buy some food for their family. These are criminal gangs. We have them. We have photographs of them taken by surveillance cameras, and it's obvious that they're not from the local village. And immediately these animals are stolen, and they end up, we have had authorities in Thailand, China, Vietnam, and Canada confiscate these these turtles. So it's it's a global network that moves them out of the region fairly quickly. We know that from the confiscation. So we're not law enforcement people. We don't have that experience and the know-how, and we're up against really well organized criminal rackets. So it's certainly not an easy task to do.
Thanks so much for your perspective on that, Steve. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add on regarding this inquiry?
I was just going to say that wildlife trafficking is the single greatest threat that turtles face today. We've got decent habitat that we can put turtles back in. It's just wildlife trafficking is our primary threat that we have to deal with. And in response to that, we're holding a major turtle trafficking symposium this August in conjunction with the TSA symposium in Tucson, Arizona. And Fish and Wildlife, in conjunction with USAID Combating Wildlife Trafficking Fund of Money, is sponsoring this major symposium. And there'll be an open session with presentations and a closed working session for more confidential discussions. But it's going to be a major deal, and we hope this symposium will be catalytic in bringing U.S. enforcement people together that are fairly refined in some of the technologies they're using, and bringing those together with our international colleagues and really doing something, bringing the minds together and trying to figure out a global strategy for monitoring and attacking this problem, because that's where the battle is going to be won or lost, is in our ability to handle wildlife trafficking. It's insidious. It's horrible. If you've ever been through one of these or several of these confiscations, I know Cris has been through the one in the Philippines and in Myanmar with the big-headed turtle. I've been through the ones in Madagascar with tens of thousands of tortoises, and they're truly. Arunima can speak to this. I mean, these are soul-sucking experiences. There's just the sense of loss of wildlife is pervasive. I mean, the feeling is just horrible and empty, and you do all you can, and but it's a horrible feeling, and you just want it to go away, but it's not. We've got to get a lot stronger about how we deal with things.
All right, thanks a lot, Rick. Aru, do you have something to add?
No, as sir said, like it's really terrible experience when you go and handle 5,000 and 10,000 turtles, and you don't have that kind of workforce, and you don't have like that kind of rehabilitation facility, and you have to handle them. You can't leave them like what they are suffering with. So you have to manage at some extent. So yeah, it's really, and we are working on it. As I said, like we will be talking about, and we will be discussing more, and we'll be raising more funds to work and tackle this situation.
All right, thanks, Aru. Yeah, the whole entire issue that Doug brings up with his question, and all of the information that all the panelists have given, it shows this bleak situation. But I think for the world of conservation and for individual conservationists, though there may be those setbacks, it's always looking for those next bright steps and those achievements, because with any problem you can tackle it, and you can continue to tackle it. And so that kind of segues to the last question that we have in the Q&A is, what's the most important piece of advice you would give to someone who would like to become involved in turtle conservation? And I'll start down with Heather. Heather, what do you think?
Sorry, I've lost my on his set, and I don't have anything else going on, so apologies.
It's okay, we can still see you.
Great. I would say volunteer or find a way to get some experience in turtle conservation in your community, and be dedicated to it and learn as much as you can close by, and then look at opportunities to expand that. I think there are opportunities if you're committed and you stay involved.
That's great. Thank you, Heather. Caesar, what do you think? What advice would you give to somebody?
Yeah, I think conservation, turtle conservation is complex. Of course, I would advise to learn as much as you can about turtle ecology, but it's also important to gain your skills working with people, because at the end, it's all about how you handle people and how you solve the complex human problems. So yeah, working with people and learning how to do that is very, very crucial.
All right, thank you. Alejandra, what's your advice?
Yeah, definitely volunteering with the organizations that they know of, but also passing the word, like talking about trolls with anyone that you can, because, well, we all have stories with trolls, like even as with pets, and not a lot of people know that they are among the most endangered group of organisms. So that's a lot of work to do, not only in the field, but communicating what we know with our families, our friends. Yeah, use social media.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Cris, I'll go to you next. And you alluded to a lot of this in one of your responses tonight, but if you want to, I'd love for you to plug that away again if you'd like to.
Yeah, I would just add to what everyone else has said. I agree. Yeah, everyone is right. And when what they're saying, you just got to know what you're interested in and what you want out of it, or what you would like out of it at least, and stick with it, and just, find the people that are doing the things that you want to do. Try to insert yourself. A lot of times you have to volunteer for a year. It's much more competitive now than it was 30 or 40 years ago, but it's certainly obtainable. Definitely be flexible. A lot of this work is kind of round the clock all around the world. So you might, want to work different jobs until you land in a place that you feel is where you want to stay and work for a long period of time. And of course, if there's an opportunity there, but there is, somewhat a bit of a sacrifice to it too, because you are moving around. There's usually not a lot of glamour and pay involved in conservation. So it's definitely a labor of love, and just kind of, sticking to it and getting through. If you get bored real easy, it's probably not a job that you're cut out for. You have to, but turtles are exciting. Turtle work, conservation work is exciting. Every day is different. It's rewarding work, regardless of the cash rewards that may come with it to pay your bills. But it's rewarding if that's what you want to do, and stick with it.
Thanks, Cris. Arunima?
Yeah, so what I feel, anyone can get involved into the conservation work. As Cris said, like, it's really, it's rewarding, and it's always fun working with turtles, and even any conservation work. So it's kind of place where you come once, it's very difficult to go out of it. Like it's like you get stuck with the conservation work. So yeah, I would encourage more people get involved into that, so we'll be having more helping hands.
Thank you, Arun. Steve, what advice would you give?
Probably the first thing is to stay out of jail. No, I think my advice would echo the other panelists. I just would like to say it is extremely rewarding, but not from a monetary standpoint. If you want to make money, go into business or do something else, because you're not going to get rich, being a turtle biologist. But on the other hand, I don't. It's probably not a morning I don't wake up and look forward to going to work. And you always feel like you're doing something important. I mean, everybody here is involved in saving species from extinction. And I don't think there's a more lofty goal than that. I mean, once a species is gone, we can't bring it back, at least with the current technology that we have. I'd like to think that we're making a difference. And so, that's kind of what drives me, what drives me, keeps me going. I'd also say that, to volunteer, like everybody says, get that experience. You got to have experience. Volunteering, is extremely important, and people will take you on. But also one thing I'd like to add is to read, and read. There's just, intellectually, become an expert in the field. And I think, Pasteur kind of said it all when he that quote from him about chance favors the prepared mind. So, prepare yourself intellectually to go out there and deal with whatever challenges that you might have, that might arise in the field.
Love that answer, Steve. Thank you. And we will finish up with that question, being answered by TSA President Rick Hudson.
Well, it's kind of hard to add to what's already been said. Sometimes it's just about being at the right place at the right time, and you tend to make your own luck. The best advice I can give is, hang out with like-minded people. Find people that share your passion and share your interest, and hang out with them and get to know them, and find a mentor. Volunteer. If you've got a local zoo that has a herpetology program, has a turtle program, get involved. Just, expose yourself to as many opportunities as you can, because sometimes these opportunities come up and they don't even get advertised. It's just, you're in the right place at the right time to seize the moment. And that's what it's all about. Just positioning yourself to be there when the opportunity strikes. And if it was meant to be, it's meant to be. And if it wasn't, it wasn't. But you exactly what Steve said, chance favors the prepared mind. So just put yourself in position for something good to happen. I know that sounds too cosmic, but that's how it works.
No, it's very true. I mean, everything that all of you have said, and especially gaining as much knowledge as you can and being prepared, and so that when that right timing comes, or that chance comes, you're ready to basically seize it. So that's great. Thank you very much.
I think most of us feel like we've never, that actually work in this business, feel like we've never really gone to work a day in our life. That's how I feel. I mean, I look forward to every day, and it's just got lucky.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you all for participating. This has been great, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you. I want to say thank you to all of the panelists tonight. You all have had wonderful answers, and many of you, all of you inspire me as the communications and outreach coordinator for TSA on a regular basis, on a daily basis. Being able to share your stories really, is, like Rick says, you don't have to work a day in your life, and it's what I love coming to work for. So thank you very much. And for all the viewers tonight, thank you very much. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email me, jgray@turtlesurvival.org. If you have any questions for the specific panelists, I'll be glad to put you in touch with them. Or you can also email us at info@turtlesurvival.org. We do not have another webinar scheduled for our Turtle Month, but we do have something very exciting, and that is live from the Turtle Survival Center. That is happening on Monday, May 23rd, World Turtle Day at 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, where Chelsea Wren and the staff of our Turtle Survival Center will be taking you around the TSC and introducing you to many of the endangered and critically endangered species that live there. So we look forward to seeing you then. Happy Turtle Month and upcoming World Turtle Day. And I hope you enjoyed Tales from the Field. Thank you all very much and have a great night, morning, afternoon, or go to bed.